They saw the weapon before they saw the man who built it. A crooked iron tube, thick-walled, blackened by heat, with a pistol grip stolen from a dead rifle and a crude shoulder pad welded from a piece of truck leaf spring. It lay on an ammunition crate in the middle of the ruined farmhouse yard, catching the weak gray light of an overcast morning. A ring of tired infantrymen closed around it the way bored children crowd a new toy. Someone whistled, someone laughed. One of them poked the muzzle with a boot as if expecting it to hiss back. "Is this a cannon or a plumbing disaster?" a soldier muttered. The owner of the thing finally stepped into the circle. He was taller than most, broad-shouldered, with the posture of a man who had spent half his life bent over metal. His uniform looked like a compromise, clean enough for inspection, dirty enough for the front. On his left arm, the fabric bore the faint charred mark of an old burn that no longer hurt but refused to disappear. "My name is Alex Morozov," he said calmly. "And yes, that ugly thing is mine." Nobody saluted. This was not that kind of moment. The platoon had arrived in this shattered village 3 days ago, at the end of a retreat that felt less like an orderly maneuver and more like being pushed downhill by an avalanche. They had lost people, vehicles, and most of their heavy weapons on the way. Now they were told to hold this patch of cracked stone and splintered wood, as if bare orders could stop artillery shells. The farmhouse courtyard was their temporary HQ. The roof was mostly gone, the windows missing, one corner of the building sliced away by some long-forgotten explosion. Someone had hung a tattered tarp to keep the wind out. Another had lined the inner walls with sandbags that leaked dust onto the floorboards with every impact in the distance. In that gray, exhausted space, Alex's weapon looked completely out of place. Private Lewis, the youngest in the platoon, walked a slow circle around the tube, grinning. "This is it, boys. Secret weapon. The High Command has finally sent us something special," he announced. "Behold, the Mark I suicide pipe." Laughter rolled through the group. It sounded more grateful than cruel. Any distraction was welcome. Lewis picked up the tube with both hands, surprised by the weight. The thing was heavy, unbalanced, dense with something more than just steel. A length of rebar served as a reinforcing spine across the top. Rough, ugly welds ran along its seams like scars. On the side, someone, probably Alex, had scratched a series of lines and numbers with a scribe, half erased by soot. "Careful with that," Alex said sharply. "The firing pin is live." Lewis snorted, but he adjusted his grip. "Relax, engineer. I just want to see what kind of monument I'll be posing with on my last day." He planted his feet, hoisted the tube onto his shoulder, exaggeratedly aiming it at the broken barn across the yard. Another soldier, Ivan, raised his empty rifle like a camera. "Hold still," Ivan called. "This is going in the family album, the moment before the explosion." The squad howled. Men who hadn't laughed properly in days found themselves grinning, shoulders relaxing for a second. The front had starved them of jokes. They took what they could get. Alex watched in silence. He had expected mockery. He had prepared for it the way he prepared for recoil and blast pressure, by calculating angles, adjusting expectations, bracing his jaw. He knew what the thing looked like. No paint, no factory stamps, no smooth ergonomic lines, just steel, effort, and a decision he had made 3 weeks ago when 3 friends died in front of a machine gun they could not reach. The farmhouse door creaked open. Lieutenant Daniel Harris stepped out, ducking automatically under a missing lintel that no longer existed. Habit, experience, muscle memory. He wore his fatigue like another layer of uniform. Dark circles under his eyes, a few days of uneven stubble, a map case that had more holes patched than original material. He stopped when he saw the circle of men, the raised tube, the frozen photo pose. "What is this circus?" he asked, his voice flat. The laughter throttled down, not completely, but enough that everyone heard the warning in his tone. Lewis slowly lowered the tube from his shoulder and turned, still smiling, though less confidently now. "Sir, we're just checking out the new hardware," he said. Harris's gaze shifted to the weapon, then to Alex. "Is that yours, Corporal?" Alex nodded once. "Yes, sir." "Is it standard issue?" Harris asked. "No, sir." "Then why," Harris continued, stepping closer, "is a non-standard, obviously homemade, potentially lethal object being passed around in the middle of my platoon like a joke?" The courtyard felt smaller all at once. Distant artillery thumped somewhere to the east, a reminder that there were far larger explosions in the world than anything this pipe could manage. A draft snuck through the broken gate, carrying the burnt metal smell of the front line. Alex took a breath. "It's a shoulder-fired grenade launcher, sir," he said evenly. "Single shot, uses modified fragmentation grenades in a guided tube with a directional charge. I designed it based on some factory prototypes I saw before the war and what we have available here." Harris stared at him. "A grenade launcher," he repeated. "You welded yourself?" "Yes, sir." Lewis couldn't help himself. Self-made, self-aimed, self-funeral. A few nervous chuckles leaked out. Harris ignored them. He stepped even closer, now within reach of the weapon. He took it out of Lewis's hands with both of his own, testing the balance, feeling the weight, the roughness of the metal. His fingers traced one of the welded seams, then the crude sight mounted on top, a bent piece of metal with 2 notches. "How many times has this been fired?" he asked quietly. Alex hesitated for the first time. "Twice, sir. Test shots, reduced charges, in a controlled area, away from the men." "In a controlled area," Harris repeated. "Out of my knowledge, out of my authorization." "Yes, sir," Alex said. "That's correct." Behind them, one of the older soldiers coughed. "Sir, the thing didn't blow up," Ivan offered. "I was there. We stood a safe distance away. It hit the target wall. Not very pretty, but—" Harris cut him off with a raised hand. "I didn't ask for testimonials," he said. "I asked who thought it was a good idea to build unauthorized ordnance in a forward position." His eyes went back to Alex. "Explain yourself, Corporal. Carefully." Alex straightened his shoulders. He looked more like a man back on the factory floor than a soldier now, precise, focused, as if standing at a machine under a supervisor's stare. "Sir," he began, "3 weeks ago in my previous unit, we tried to take a farmhouse on the ridge near Sector 7. The enemy had a machine gun in the upper window, shielded by sandbags and brick. We could see it. We couldn't touch it. Our rifles didn't have the range or penetration. Our grenades couldn't be thrown that far uphill without rolling back. We had no launcher, no anti-armor weapon, nothing." His voice didn't shake. It just grew slightly quieter. "We lost 8 men in under 2 minutes trying to cross that open ground. Good men. I watched them die halfway between us and that window. If we'd had something like this," he nodded at the tube in Harris's hands, "we could have put a grenade directly into that position without exposing anyone. We didn't. So I decided I would never stand and watch that happen again if there was anything I could do about it." Silence settled over the courtyard. Even Lewis wasn't smiling now. The men shifted their weight, boots grinding dust and splinters into the ground. Harris looked down at the crude launcher again. The thing was ugly, no question. It reeked of desperation more than engineering. But he also knew the truth Alex was pointing at. Their official launchers, their factory-perfect tubes and tripods were all somewhere else, on some other front, with some other unit that mattered more to the people drawing maps far behind the lines. "We are an infantry platoon, Corporal," Harris said at last. "We don't get to improvise our own arsenal because command forgot to send us toys." "With respect, sir," Alex replied, "this isn't a toy. It's a tool built around the reality we live in. Steel, explosives, and a problem that won't solve itself." Harris almost smiled at that. Almost. He handed the launcher back to Alex. "Reality," he echoed. "Reality is that if that thing malfunctions, the explosion happens in your face, not in the enemy's window. And then I'm writing the report explaining why one of my corporals decided to turn himself into shrapnel using an unauthorized device." Alex accepted the tube, holding it with the casual familiarity of someone who had already imagined all the ways it could fail, and built it anyway. "I accounted for pressure," he said. "The tube walls are more than thick enough. The welds hold. The firing pin is contained. The only real variable now is the charge balance and—" "Stop," Harris said, raising a hand again. "I'm not debating engineering with you, Morozov. This is not a workshop. This is a war." He took a step back so he could address the whole group. "Listen up," he called. "What I'm going to say now is not complicated." The platoon straightened, instinctive. "No one touches this thing," Harris continued, nodding toward the launcher. "Without my direct order. No photos, no jokes, no test shots. It does not leave this courtyard unless I say so. If I catch anyone playing with it again, I will personally cut it into scrap and make you carry the pieces for a week. Is that clear?" A chorus of "Yes, sir," echoed, some more enthusiastic than others. Harris looked back at Alex. "And you, Corporal," he said, voice lower. "Consider this an unofficial warning. You build anything else that can blow a hole in my platoon without telling me first, and we'll have a much more serious conversation. Understood?" "Understood, sir," Alex answered. For a moment, their eyes met. Behind the irritation, behind the rigid officer's mask, Harris let a small crack show, just enough that Alex saw the fear inside it. Not fear of disobedience, not fear of paperwork. Fear of being responsible for men dying because he either allowed something reckless or refused something that might have saved them. The lieutenant turned away, towards the broken section of wall that looked out over the fields. In the distance, low ground mist hugged the earth where shells had churned it into mud and bone. Beyond that, a faint dark line of trees marked the far edge of their sector. Somewhere behind those trees, the enemy was assembling for whatever came next. "Platoon briefing in 30 minutes, Harris said over his shoulder. "We've got new orders from battalion. Eat if you can, smoke if you need, pray if it helps." The men began to drift apart. Some went back inside the farmhouse to straighten gear or dig another layer into the makeshift firing positions. Others sat on overturned crates, lighting cigarettes with hands that had just touched the cold steel of Alex's invention. Lewis lingered, staring at the launcher. "You really think this thing can punch through a machine gun nest?" he asked quietly. Alex looked at the horizon, then back at the young private. "I don't know yet," he said. "But I know what happens if we rely only on what we've been officially given. We've seen that already." Lewis swallowed. "And if it blows up in your hands?" Alex's answer was simple. "Then at least it blows up trying to solve the right problem." He slung the launcher over his shoulder with the natural motion of someone picking up a tool, not a weapon. The grip fit his palm. The weight settled against his back. The metal was cold, but there was something almost alive in it, a potential that hadn't yet chosen a direction. Above them, a distant boom rolled across the sky. The next phase of the war was moving closer, one measured step at a time. In a few days, the men in this courtyard would remember this moment and think of it as nothing more than a prologue. Back then, it was just a joke with a pipe. Later, they would realize the joke weapon was the only reason any of them were still alive. The village looked different at night. By day, it was just ruins and mud, a bad memory the army had forgotten to erase. By night, it turned into a maze of black shapes and broken silhouettes, every doorway a possible muzzle flash, every window a dark eye that might open and spit fire. Alex Morozov moved through it like he had built it himself. He stepped over a shattered beam, ducked under a hanging length of barbed wire, and pushed open the side door of a collapsed stable where someone had hung a piece of cloth to block the wind. Inside, the air smelled of oil, rust, and damp straw. A single red-tinted lamp burned on an overturned barrel, wrapped in cloth so its light didn't escape through the cracks. This was where he worked. The launcher lay on the table in front of him, disassembled into its essential bones. The thick tube, the welded grip, the crude sight, the rear cap with its improvised firing mechanism. Around it were tools that had no right to be this close to a front line: a small hand drill, a cracked measuring caliper, a file worn thin from years of use. Next to them, like forbidden fruit, sat the real danger: 3 modified grenades. Private Ivan slipped in behind him, letting the cloth fall back into place. "You're going to get shot one day just for how suspicious this looks," Ivan muttered. "If the lieutenant walks in now, he'll think you're building a rocket to the moon." Alex didn't look up. "If I were building a rocket, it would be easier," he said quietly. "At least rockets are meant to go forward. Grenades like to argue." He picked up one of the grenades, turning it in his fingers. Its body was now wrapped in a thin steel sleeve he had cut from a piece of damaged pipe, with shallow grooves filed into it to break into more predictable fragments. At the base, a small metal collar matched the inner diameter of the launcher tube. "Look," Alex said, "the collar keeps the grenade centered during launch. If it rattles, it can yaw in the bore, the pressure hits the wrong place, and we get a very short, very bright show in here instead of out there." Ivan tapped the steel tube. "And you're sure this thing won't crack?" Alex answered without hesitation. "I'm as sure as I can be without having a factory, real steel analysis, or proper testing ranges," he said. "I measured the wall thickness, I overbuilt the welds, I've run reduced charges. That's all I can do here." He paused, then added, "Back home, when we built pressure vessels, If one exploded, it hit the roof. Here, if this explodes, it hits my face. That's a good motivation to get the math right. Ivan snorted softly. You joke about it too easily. There's nothing easy about it, Alex replied. I just don't have the luxury of pretending we're safe without this. He reassembled the launcher piece by piece, moving with automatic precision. His hands had been doing this kind of work for years before the war gave him a uniform and a rifle. Back then, his world had been hot metal and machine noise, not incoming shells and screaming. He remembered the first time he'd seen a real factory-made shoulder launcher. It had been on a visit from a weapons engineer to the plant, a brief demonstration to show off new contracts. Sleek lines, balanced weight, clever recoil mitigation. The engineer had spoken in numbers and specifications, pointing at diagrams. Alex had stood at the back, absorbing details and committing them to memory for no reason other than curiosity. He hadn't known he was taking notes for his own survival. Why not just leave it to the people who were supposed to build these things? Ivan asked suddenly, as if reading his thoughts. To the factories, the logistics, the big brains behind the maps? Alex tightened the rear cap, then leaned on the tube with both hands, staring at its rough surface. Do you trust them? He asked. Ivan hesitated. I trust them to forget people like us, Alex continued, to send nice words over the radio and not much else. They have priorities. We're not one of them. You think this changes that? Ivan said. One pipe and a few grenades? No, Alex said. This doesn't change them. It changes what I can do when their decisions finally reach this farmyard in the form of machine gun fire. For a moment, the only sound was the soft rasp of cloth on metal as Alex wiped residual oil from the seams. He spoke again, voice lower. I had a friend in my old unit, Sasha. He used to say, we're just dots on someone's map. They move the dots around. Sometimes they erase them, that's all. What happened to him? Ivan asked. He crossed that open field under the Ridge machine gun, Alex said. He didn't make it halfway. He didn't need to say more. The image was enough. Outside, a distant flare arced up into the sky and burned briefly, turning the ruins into negative-color ghosts before going out. The war kept breathing, even while they hid in its lungs. You know Harris could shut this down completely, Ivan said. He's obeying regulations. If he reports this up the chain, they'll order you to destroy it. Alex nodded. I know, he said. That's why I showed it to him in daylight. If I kept it hidden and used it later, after something went wrong, that would be betrayal. This way, he knows it exists. He made his choice. So did I. What choice? Ivan asked. Alex lifted the launcher and set it on his shoulder, adjusting his stance as if taking aim at some invisible window across the stable. The choice between one risk and another, he said. Do we risk blowing ourselves up with something imperfect? Or do we risk letting the enemy keep every advantage because we're too afraid of our own tools? He lowered the tube again and checked the firing mechanism one more time. Perfection isn't coming, he added. Not in time for us. Ivan sat down on a cracked wooden crate, elbows on his knees. You talk like an engineer and a priest at the same time, he muttered, not sure which worries me more. They're the same job sometimes, Alex said. You convince people to trust things they can't see yet. Numbers, reinforcement, failure tolerances, or hope. Footsteps crunched outside. They both froze, instinctively killing the lamp. The stable plunged into darkness, the afterimage of the red light ghosting in their eyes. The doorcloth moved, then a familiar outline appeared in the gap. Relax, Lewis whispered. It's just me. Alex relit the lamp, its glow slowly rising. You shouldn't be here, he said. If Harris walks in and sees half the platoon in my illegal workshop, he'll drag me out by the collar and throw this thing into the river. Lewis slipped inside and closed the door behind him. I just came to ask one question, he said. When this all goes bad, and we all know it will, are you really going to leave that thing in a corner because the manual says it's not allowed? Alex looked at him. What do you think? He asked. Lewis shrugged, eyes on the launcher. I think, he said slowly, if that machine gun starts chewing us up like it did to your old unit, nobody's going to care about manuals. Alex didn't answer. He didn't need to. Instead, he picked up one of the modified grenades and slid it into the tube, feeling the tight fit of the collar against the bore. It settled with a dull, final sound, like a decision being made. In his head, he ran through the numbers again. Pressure, distance, angle, margin of error, failure modes, all the quiet calculations that didn't show on the surface. Once, he had used this kind of thinking to keep machines from breaking down and ruining production schedules. Now, he used it to decide who lived and who didn't. The war didn't care about the difference. Lieutenant Harris didn't sleep much anymore. He lay on a narrow cot in what used to be a farmhouse bedroom, staring at the cracked ceiling while the night wind whispered through gaps in the walls. Every artillery thud in the distance wrote another line of problems in his mind. Every sharp crack of a rifle made him picture one of his men falling. But tonight, something else kept replaying behind his eyes. A homemade tube, rough welds, calm eyes above a dirty collar saying, "If we'd had something like this, 8 men might still be alive." He sat up, swung his legs over the side of the cot, and rubbed his face with both hands until the fatigue behind his eyes turned into a sharper, more functional kind of pain. In officer school, they had taught him about doctrine, formations, fields of fire. They had talked about weapons in terms of types and numbers, not improvisations and desperation. Enforcement of regulations had been clear-cut. Unauthorized weapons were a threat to safety and discipline, no debate. But officer school hadn't taken place in this village. It hadn't been under this sky with this kind of silence between shell bursts. A soft knock at the door pulled him out of his thoughts. "Come in," Harris said. Sergeant Cole stepped inside. Older than Harris by at least 10 years, he carried himself like a man welded to the army long before this war started. His face was a map of lines, some from laughter long gone, most from frowns that never fully left. "Sir," Cole said, "you're up late." "So are you," Harris replied. "Bad habit," Cole said. "You wanted the latest from recon." He handed over a folded map with pencil marks and notes scrawled around the edges. Harris spread it on the table, smoothing creases with his palms. "Walk me through it," he said. Cole leaned over, tapping with a blunt finger. "Enemy infantry massing along this tree line," he began. "We saw movement, trucks, some kind of armored vehicle. Couldn't get closer without lighting ourselves up, but it's definitely not just a patrol. They're consolidating." "And here?" Harris asked, pointing at a red circle drawn around a bend in the main road just outside the village. "Machine gun nest," Cole said. "We spotted flashes from there earlier, likely a heavy weapon with overlapping fields of fire along the road and part of our right flank." "So they pin us here," Harris said slowly, tracing imaginary lines. "Push from the front, flank the right, cut off retreat along the road." "Textbook," Cole said. "They don't even have to be clever. We're short on heavy support, short on ammo, short on everything except dirt and bad news." He straightened, watching Harris's expression. "You sent another request for artillery?" Cole asked. "2," Harris said. "One for artillery, one for any kind of launcher or anti-armor weapon." The reply was polite, which means useless, Cole translated, which means hold where you are, delay the enemy. "We'll think about you when we finish worrying about other sectors," Harris said. "Same as last week, same as the week before." He leaned on the table, knuckles white against the wood. "This position is not designed for what's coming, Sergeant. We can hold a probing attack. We can't hold a full clearing operation with armor and heavy guns." "Then we don't hold," Cole said quietly. "We bleed, we buy time, we fall back if we get the chance. You know the drill." Harris nodded, but his eyes drifted, uninvited, to the far corner of the room where a shape lay under a blanket. The shape of a tube, too thick, too crude, too familiar. "You saw Morozov's invention," Harris said. Cole's mouth twitched. "Hard to miss," he replied. "Looks like something my grandfather would have built in his barn, if my grandfather hated living." "What do you think?" Harris asked. "As a sergeant," Cole said, "or as a man who's been on the wrong end of a machine gun more times than he cares to count?" "Both," Harris answered. Cole took a breath, letting it out slowly. "As a sergeant," he said, "I think unauthorized explosives are a nightmare. If that thing fails, we've got shrapnel in our own ranks and no one at HQ is going to pat us on the back for our creativity. They'll hang us with regulations." "And as a man?" Harris prompted. Cole's eyes lost focus for a moment, looking at something far behind the wall. "As a man," he said quietly. "I remember a churchyard near the river last year. Enemy gun in the bell tower. We had rifles and grenades, nothing that could reach high enough with enough force. We tried anyway. We left 12 men in that yard. He glanced at the covered tube. If there had been something like this there, ugly, risky, but able to lob a grenade into that tower, I'd have taken the chance, Cole finished. I'd have taken it and signed whatever paperwork they wanted afterwards. Silence settled between them, broken only by the faint groaning of the damaged house in the wind. You know the rules, Sergeant, Harris said. If I authorize this and it goes wrong, it's on me. Not on Morozov, not on you, on me. Yes, sir, Cole said. That's what the bars on your shoulders are for. The words weren't disrespectful. They were just true. Harris walked over to the corner, pulled back the blanket and exposed the launcher. Under the softer indoor light, it looked even more primitive. No smooth edges, no stamped markings, no guarantee. Morozov said he's tested it twice, Harris said. On damaged walls and abandoned structures, Cole replied. Not on real targets. Not under fire. Not with someone's life in the blast radius. Harris's jaw tightened. You think I should forbid it completely? He asked. Cole took his time answering. I think, he said slowly, you should treat it like a last knife in a dark room. You don't wave it around to impress anyone. You don't pretend it's a sword. You keep it hidden until there's nothing else left, and then you use it without hesitation. Harris looked down at the weapon as if it might answer for itself. We're already low on options, he said. How many else do you think we have left before we reach nothing? Depends on how many shells the enemy brought, Cole said. But if recon's right, I wouldn't count on a long menu. Harris let the blanket fall back over the tube. Very well, he said. For now it stays off the books. No one uses it. No one trains with it. No one even mentions it to the other officers. Cole nodded. And when the time comes? He asked. Harris didn't hesitate. When the time comes, he said, I'll point Morozov at whatever's killing us the fastest and tell him to pull the trigger. He sat back down on the edge of the cot, suddenly exhausted again. Until then, he added, we pretend that doctrine and reality are still on speaking terms. Cole almost smiled. With respect, sir, he said, doctrine doesn't crawl through this mud with us. He turned to leave, then paused at the door. One more thing, he said. Morozov's not stupid. He knows the risk better than any of us. If you do give him the go-ahead, don't second-guess him while he's doing it. Give him the target and clear line. Let him work. Harris nodded slowly. I didn't plan on becoming the kind of officer who bets his platoon on a homemade weapon, he said. Nobody plans that, Cole replied. War plans it for you. When Cole left, the room felt quieter, as if the walls were holding their breath. Harris lay back on the cot but didn't close his eyes. He stared at the ceiling again. Only this time, the picture in his mind was different. Not just men advancing under fire, not just positions falling. Now there was also a tube of blackened metal in the frame. Heavy, risky, and just maybe the only line of text left in the margin of a page someone else had already decided to tear out. Morning didn't arrive as a sunrise. It arrived as a sound. The first shell landed far enough away to be a question, not an answer. A distant boom, a faint tremor in the ground, a dull thud of displaced air sliding through the broken windows. The second shell landed closer. Dust drifted from the farmhouse beams. Someone swore downstairs. Somewhere in the village, a dog barked once, then went silent. By the third explosion, no one was asking what was happening anymore. They were just moving. Up! Sergeant Cole's voice cut through the noise. Positions now! Move like you mean it! Alex grabbed his rifle, slung the launcher over his shoulder, and stepped into the corridor already crowded with men buckling straps and snapping magazines into place. The air tasted sharp with adrenaline before anyone fired a single shot. Outside, the sky was a flat, pale color, neither bright nor dark. It was the kind of sky that seemed to promise nothing good. The platoon spilled into the courtyard, splitting automatically into squads and fire teams. They knew their assigned positions well enough now. 3 days in the same killing ground made everything familiar, even the spots where they might die. Lewis fell in beside Alex, checking his own weapon. Is this it? He asked, voice too steady to be natural. Is this the big one? Feels like it, Alex replied. Across the yard, Harris stood near the broken gate, radio handset pressed to his ear, shouting over the growing thunder of artillery. This is 1st Platoon, East Sector. We're taking preliminary shelling, he yelled into the mouthpiece. Requesting confirmation on enemy movement and fire support allocation. In his other hand, the map shook slightly with each blast. The reply came back as a burst of static, then a too-calm voice colored by distance. "First platoon, maintain position," the voice said. "Higher units are engaged. Artillery priority is currently elsewhere. You are to delay any enemy advance as long as possible. Repeat, maintain position and delay." "Copy," Harris said, jaw clenched. "Any ETA on support?" "Negative. Hold what you have. Out." The line went dead. Harris lowered the handset slowly, eyes flicking toward the horizon beyond the ruined walls. Out past the last crumbled houses, where the fields dipped and rose in shallow waves, dark shapes were beginning to appear. At first, they were just smudges against the land. Then, they became men, lines of them, spaced, moving with practiced coordination. Behind them rumbled something heavier, metal glinting where the light caught angles no natural rock ever had. Enemy infantry, armor, a full-scale push. "Positions!" Harris shouted. "Machine gun team, farmyard wall. Marksman, second floor windows. Everyone else, you know your sectors. We hold them as long as we can, then we fall back street by street. No heroes, no lone charges. We make them pay for every meter." He turned, scanning faces until he found Alex. "Morozov!" he barked. Alex stepped forward. "Sir!" Harris's eyes dropped briefly to the launcher on Alex's shoulder, then came back up. "That thing stays cold until I say otherwise," Harris said. "Do not fire it without my order. Do you understand?" "Yes, sir," Alex answered. "And Morozov," Harris added, "when I do give the order, I don't want an explanation. I want results." "Understood," Alex said. He moved to his assigned firing position behind a low stone wall that bordered the courtyard. From there, he could see down the main road leading into the village, a straight line of broken asphalt and dirt with no cover worth mentioning. The perfect killing ground for a machine gun, or a launcher if he ever got the chance. The shelling intensified. Explosions walked their way closer, throwing up fountains of dirt and stone. One shell hit the far side of the village square, ripping the front off an already damaged shop. Shards of glass and brick rained down, sparkling briefly in the morning light before disappearing into the dust cloud. "Incoming! Get down!" someone screamed. Alex pressed himself behind the wall as another shell landed so close the world turned white for a heartbeat. The blast punched the air out of his lungs, filled his mouth with grit, and made his ears ring. When the dust cleared, he could still move. That was more than could be said for the twisted shape lying near the corner of the farmhouse where a man had been seconds before. There was no time to check who it was. The artillery shifted, overshooting slightly as enemy fire controllers adjusted their range. The barrage crept deeper into the village, carving paths for the infantry behind it. "Here they come!" someone called from an upper window. Alex risked a quick look over the wall. Enemy soldiers were advancing in staggered lines, using the dips in the terrain and the remains of fences for cover. They moved with the confidence of men who knew they had heavier guns behind them. Then, the machine gun opened up. It came from the right, from the bend in the road outside the village. A deep, hungry sound, different from the sharp cracks of rifles. Its bullets tore into the stone around Alex in violent puffs, chipping away centuries of weather in seconds. "Down!" Cole shouted. "They've got a heavy covering the road." The machine gun swept the approach, then shifted, stitching the front of the farmhouse with sparks and splinters. Anyone who tried to move across the open yard would be shredded before they took 3 steps. Alex slid back, heart hammering. "There," he gasped, pointing toward the bend. "That's it. That's the gun." "I see it," Cole said, ducking as another burst chewed the top of the wall. "Can't get an angle from here. Snipers?" "Negative," came a voice from above. "We've got fragments of muzzle flash only. No clear shot." The enemy infantry kept coming, now under the protective umbrella of their heavy gun. Every time one of Harris's men tried to lean over cover for more than a breath, the heavy weapons sent a stream of rounds to push them back down. This is exactly what happened before, Alex thought. Different field, different farmhouse, same problem. Enemy gun high or far, their sides stuck with rifles and grenades that might as well have been stones thrown by hand. He could feel the launcher's weight against his shoulder like a physical question. Harris crawled over behind the wall, face streaked with dust, radio still clipped to his gear. "How bad?" he asked. "Bad enough," Cole replied. "That heavy has the whole road and half the yard stitched. If we try to reposition, we're feeding him targets. We can't let them walk right up to the village under that cover, Harris said. We'll get pinned, then flanked. He looked at Alex. Can you hit that position from here? Harris asked. Alex forced himself to look, not just with fear, but with the cold, measuring gaze of the engineer he used to be. Distance, not perfect, but within the envelope he'd calculated. Angle, he'd have to arc the shot over a ruined wall. Cover, the gun seemed to be set up behind sandbags, maybe partially shielded by a broken vehicle husk. Risk, high. Margin for error, uncomfortably slim. Yes, Alex said. If I can get to that corner there, he pointed at a slightly higher section of wall, I can lob around into the bend. I won't see the gun, but I know where it has to be to cover the road like that. Exposing yourself to a machine gun doesn't strike me as good engineering, Harris said. The blast radius will do the seeing for me, Alex replied. If I get the distance wrong, we waste a grenade. If I get it badly wrong, it hits short and does nothing. If I get it close... He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. Harris closed his eyes for half a second, just long enough to feel the weight of the decision pressing against his ribs. Doctrine said no. Regulations said no. Safety said no. Reality said they were being torn apart by something they couldn't currently touch. He opened his eyes. Sergeant, he said to Cole, give him covering fire, short bursts enough to make that gunner flinch. Yes, sir, Cole answered, already signaling to the machine gun team. Harris grabbed Alex by the shoulder. You have one shot, he said. And if this thing backfires, I don't want anyone else near you. Understood? Alex nodded once. Understood, he said. Go, Harris ordered. Alex unslung the launcher, feeling every gram of its weight as if the steel were loaded not only with explosives, but with the sum of all the arguments against using it. He crawled along the inside of the wall, keeping his body low, the tube cradled against his chest. Bullets whined overhead, smacking into stone and wood. Each impact felt like a hand on his back, trying to push him down, keep him in place, keep everything the way it was. He ignored it. Reaching the higher corner, he pressed his back against the stone and took a breath that tasted like dust and fear. He slid a modified grenade into the tube, feeling it lock into place with that familiar, dull sound. Behind him, Cole shouted, On my mark! 3, 2, 1, fire! The platoon's own machine gun barked, sending a stream of rounds toward the suspected position of the enemy heavy. It wouldn't hit it, not from this angle, but it might make the gunner duck for half a heartbeat. That heartbeat was what Alex needed. He rose, bringing the launcher up, the tube's mouth clearing the top of the wall. The world narrowed to a rough arc in his mind, from his hands over the ruined street, down into the bend where death was speaking with a metal tongue. He didn't think about the welds. He didn't think about pressure curves or tolerances or all the ways this could end badly. He thought about the Ridge farmhouse, the church bell tower, the men who had fallen in open ground with nothing reaching out for them. He pulled the trigger. The launcher kicked into his shoulder like a truck, a brutal, concentrated punch. The tube belched flame and smoke. For a fraction of a second, Alex's ears heard nothing but a high, thin ringing. The grenade arced away, a dark shape against the pale sky, flying toward the bend in the road. He dropped back behind the wall as a hard, instinctive survival reflex took over. A heartbeat later, the bend in the road bloomed into an explosion. The explosion in the bend of the road was not clean. It was not precise. It was raw, ugly violence that tore through the morning air like a scream. A column of black smoke rose first, thick and oily, carrying the sharp tang of burning powder and metal. Then came the secondary blasts, ammunition cooking off in the heat, grenades detonating in sympathy, a chain of sharp cracks that made the ground tremble. Shrapnel whistled through the air, some pieces slamming into the nearby ruins with enough force to chip stone. For a heartbeat, the enemy machine gun fell silent. Alex stayed low behind the wall, his shoulder throbbing from the launcher's recoil, ears still ringing from the shot. He could feel the heat from the tube against his side, the metal cooling unevenly where the flash had kissed it. "Report!" Harris shouted over the fading echoes. From the upper window, a sniper's voice came back. "Direct hit! I see bodies! 3, maybe 4 down! The gun's out!" Cheers erupted from the platoon, ragged but real, cutting through the dust like a knife. For the first time that morning, it felt like they had teeth. But the silence didn't last. The enemy infantry, caught mid-advance, hesitated only for a moment before their officers screamed them forward. The machine gun nest might be gone, but they had rifles, mortars, and that armored vehicle rumbling closer, its turret swiveling toward the village like a predator spotting wounded prey. "They're pushing harder," Cole yelled. "Second wave, with support." Harris grabbed the radio again, his voice steady despite the chaos. "This is 1st Platoon. We've neutralized the heavy on the road, but they're closing fast. Armor inbound. Need extraction or fire support now." The reply crackled back, same distant calm. "Negative. You're to hold and delay. Reinforcements en route. ETA unknown. Conserve ammo." Harris slammed the handset down, cursing under his breath. He turned to Alex, eyes hard. "Reload. Whatever it takes, you buy us time." Alex nodded, already pulling another modified grenade from his pouch. His hands moved on autopilot, slide the collar into place, check the fuse, lock it into the tube. The launcher felt heavier now, not just with steel, but with the weight of what it had already done, and what it still might. The platoon opened fire as one. Rifles cracked in controlled bursts, stitching the advancing lines. The machine gun team poured lead into the flanks, forcing the enemy to bunch up in the dips of the terrain. But the armor was the problem. A squat, tracked beast with a cannon that barked once, sending a shell crashing into the farmhouse wall. Bricks exploded inward, burying part of the courtyard in rubble. "Down!" someone screamed. Lewis, caught too close, took shrapnel across the leg, a deep gash that soaked his trouser leg red. He dragged himself behind cover, face pale, but still firing one-handed. Alex rose again, sighting over the wall. The bend was clear now, smoke marking the grave of the machine gun. But farther out, the infantry was regrouping behind the armored vehicle. They were learning, using the metal beast as a shield, advancing in its shadow. "Target the tracks," Harris ordered. "Slow it down." Grenades flew from the platoon, hand-thrown, desperate arcs that fell short or bounced harmlessly off the armor. The vehicle shrugged them off, its cannon firing again. This time, splintering the stone wall near Alex, chips of rock stung his cheek like angry bees. No time for precision. Alex adjusted for the longer range, the arc steeper now. The launcher came up, steady despite the shaking ground. He exhaled, pulled the trigger. The second shot roared out, the tube bucking against his shoulder like a living thing. The grenade sailed high, a dark speck against the smoke-filled sky, dropping toward the armored vehicle. It hit the turret, not a clean penetration, but close enough. The blast shattered the optics and sent flames licking up the side. The vehicle slewed to a halt, smoke pouring from its engine, crew bailing out into the open where the platoon waited. "Got it!" Ivan whooped, pumping rounds into the exposed figures. The enemy advance faltered. Officers shouted, trying to rally, but the loss of their heavy support cracked their momentum. They fell back, dragging wounded, leaving the road littered with gear and bodies. For a precious minute, the village breathed. But it wasn't over. Recon had been right. This was a clearing operation, and they had reserves. From the tree line, fresh troops emerged, supported by mortars that began walking fire into the village. Shells cratered the streets, collapsing what little cover remained. The platoon shrank with every blast. A man vaporized in the square, another pinned under falling beams. Harris regrouped them in the farmhouse ruins, faces grim, ammo running low. "We're surrounded on 3 sides," he said, map torn and blood-smeared. "Roads are only out, but they've got it zeroed. Morozov, your toy's all we've got left." Alex checked his pouches, 1 grenade remaining. The launcher tube was scarred now, weld-stressed but holding. "I can cover the retreat," he said. "Get everyone moving while I hold the bend." Harris shook his head. "Not suicide. We go together." "No," Alex insisted. "You saw what it did. 1 more shot and they're scattered. Then you punch through." The argument died as another mortar round hit nearby, shaking the walls. Cole looked between them, then nodded. "He's right, sir. We cover him, he buys the hole, we all run." Harris met Alex's eyes, the officer's mask cracking just enough to show the man underneath, the one who hated losing soldiers to bad math. "Make it count," he said finally. "And don't you dare die on me, Corporal. That's an order." Alex slung the launcher and moved to the forward wall, the platoon forming a hasty fire line behind him. The enemy was closing again, bolder now, sensing the defenders weakening. He loaded the last grenade, the fuse cold against his fingers. This one he'd packed heavier, more charge, wider spread. Riskier for the tube, but they were past risks. The mortars lifted as infantry crested the road, rifles up, bayonets fixed. 30 men, maybe more, a wall of gray uniforms under the pale sky. Alex stood, no cover left. The launcher rose, tube aligned on the mass. He didn't aim for precision this time, just the heart of them, the choke point where the road narrowed. Pull the trigger. The world vanished in flame and thunder. The tube held, but barely. The recoil drove him back a step, shoulder numb. The grenade flew true, bursting in the enemy ranks like a fist from the earth. Screams cut the air. The advance shattered. Men thrown, lines broken, officers down. Panic rippled through them, the momentum reversing into a rout. "Now!" Harris roared. The platoon surged forward, firing as they went, pouring through the gap Alex had torn. Lewis limped on Cole's shoulder, Ivan covering the rear. They hit the road running, the village crumbling behind them under renewed shelling. Alex brought up the rear, launcher empty now, rifle in hand. A stray bullet grazed his arm, hot and sharp, but he kept moving. The tree line blurred past, then open fields, retreat turning to escape. By dusk, they linked with a relief column, battered but alive. 20 out of 38. The launcher was slung across Alex's back, dented and spent, a relic of the day. Harris clapped him on the good shoulder as medics patched wounds. "You saved us," he said simply. "Regulations be damned." The men gathered around, no jokes now. Lewis, bandaged, handed him a cigarette. "That pipe of yours, it's no joke anymore." Alex lit it, inhaling deep. The war wasn't over. The front ground on, positions shifting like sand. But in that moment, with the sun dipping low, he felt the weight lift, just a little. Back at base, command would ask questions. Reports would fly, inquiries about the unauthorized device. Harris would fight for him. The platoon would back it. Maybe the tube would be studied, copied, maybe destroyed. But Alex knew one thing. When the next farmhouse needed reaching, when the next gun spoke too loud, something like it would be there. Built from scrap, born from loss, proof that hands could still shape survival. The war took everything it could, but it couldn't take that. Not yet.